"Stand up or I'll arrest both of you for loitering." That's what Officer McCade shouted, loud enough for half the parking lot to hear, before handcuffing an innocent black couple who were simply waiting outside a bakery. No questions, no warning, just judgment based on the color of their skin. The husband, a decorated Navy veteran, and his wife, a local school counselor, were treated like criminals for doing absolutely nothing. It wasn't just an arrest, it was an insult wrapped in a badge. This isn't just a story. It's a reflection of what still happens in America when racism hides behind authority. If this moment made your blood boil, you're not alone. Leave a comment. What would you have done? Share this video and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this, because silence never changed anything, but stories like this just might. Friday afternoons in Westvale always felt like a slow burn, the kind of day where time seemed to stretch longer than usual, where sunlight settled in golden streaks over brick buildings and neatly trimmed hedges. At the edge of Oak Ridge Plaza, a luxury supermarket named Belmont and Rose stood like a glass temple to wealth, sleek, silent, and selective. It was the kind of place where cash was rarely used, where avocados were imported twice a week, and where everyone instinctively lowered their voices to match the subtle hum of Mozart drifting from hidden speakers. Marcus and Iana Pierce weren't new to this part of town. They'd moved here 5 years ago, drawn in by the promise of safer streets, better schools, and homes with actual yards. Both had worked hard to get here. Marcus, a quiet strategist in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Iana, a celebrated civil rights attorney known for her no-nonsense style and unapologetic courtroom presence. But today wasn't about politics or courtrooms. It was about groceries, just a quick stop on the way home from a local community board meeting. Iana walked ahead, her long coat billowing slightly behind her. She reached for a cart and gave Marcus a quick grin over her shoulder. "You remembered to bring the list this time?" Marcus patted his coat pocket, printed and highlighted. "I don't plan on getting scolded over cilantro again." Iana chuckled. It was parsley. They walked inside, greeted by a cool wave of air that carried hints of lavender and citrus. The store was immaculate, spotless tiles, rows of perfectly arranged produce. A barista behind the in-house coffee counter gave them a nod, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus noticed. Iana didn't, or maybe she did, but was too used to it to care. They moved through the produce section, taking their time. Iana was mid-rant about zoning permits when she reached for a bundle of organic kale. Marcus leaned into a refrigerated display, checking the yogurt labels. They were laughing about a joke only they understood. Something about City Councilman Mitchell's tie looking like a melted popsicle when it happened. 2 police officers entered the store, one tall and broad-shouldered, the other wiry with a buzz cut, their uniforms crisp, their badges gleaming under the overhead lights. They didn't say anything at first, just stood near the entrance, scanning the store like security cameras in human form. Then one of them, Officer Cole, according to his name tag, tapped his partner and nodded toward the couple. Marcus didn't notice. Iana did. "They're watching us," she murmured. Marcus looked up. "How do you know?" Iana didn't answer. She didn't have to. They continued shopping, slower now, their movements more deliberate. Marcus placed a jar of almond butter into the cart. Iana grabbed a bag of wild rice. They turned toward the dairy aisle, and that's when the officers moved in. "Excuse me," Officer Cole said, stepping directly into Marcus's path. "We received a report of suspicious behavior. Store management says you've been loitering in the produce section for over 20 minutes. Iana blinked. "Loitering? We're buying groceries." "We'd like to see some ID," the second officer added. His voice was firm, rehearsed, like he was reading a script. "Standard procedure." "No, it's not," Iana said sharply. "And unless you have probable cause or a warrant, you don't get to stop us in the middle of a grocery store." A few customers nearby froze. Others walked away quickly, pretending not to see. Cole's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, we're not going to argue. This can be quick, or it can be complicated." Marcus stepped between them. "Is there a reason you're targeting us?" The officer didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and grabbed Marcus's arm. "Hey!" Iana snapped, stepping forward. In one swift motion, the other officer moved behind her. Before either of them could react, Ayanna and Marcus were both being handcuffed. The cold click of steel around Marcus's wrists felt surreal. He looked around, waiting for someone to say something, to intervene, but the only sound was the quiet shuffle of footsteps moving away. No one said a word. "This is harassment," Ayanna said, her voice steady but rising. "You're making a mistake." "You're causing a scene," Officer Cole replied. "Let's go." As they were marched toward the exit, the store manager finally appeared, thin, balding, clutching a clipboard, like it was a shield. He didn't look at them, just nodded quietly to the officers. Outside, the sun was still shining, but the air felt heavier. The officers guided them to a waiting patrol car, parked right in front of the store's pristine entrance. Marcus's voice was low but calm. "You really don't know who you're arresting, do you?" Cole smirked. "Don't care." Ayanna leaned closer to her husband as they were placed in the back seat. "Let them think we're nobodies," she whispered. "Let them think they won." Inside the patrol car, neither of them spoke for several minutes. Marcus watched the streets roll by through the smudged glass of the back window. The officer driving said something about procedure. The one in the passenger seat chuckled. Ayanna slowly exhaled. "We're not calling the DOJ yet." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No? Not yet," she said. "Let's see how deep the hole gets." When they pulled up in front of Precinct 21, the building looked like any other small-town police station. Weathered brick, old flag, a buzzing streetlight flickering just outside the main door. But what Ayanna saw was more than a building. She saw the silence, the same silence that had hidden abuse, eroded trust, and swallowed truth whole. As they were led inside, she felt the eyes of officers behind glass desks, typing reports, sipping lukewarm coffee, pretending not to notice. Marcus glanced at a corkboard on the wall, complaint forms pinned neatly in rows, every one of them stamped "Resolved." Their cuffs weren't removed. No one asked if they wanted to make a phone call, and the only sound was the low hum of the vending machine in the corner, humming like a warning. This was not a mistake. This was a machine, and Ayanna Pierce had just found its gears. The holding cell was colder than Marcus expected. The walls, a faded yellow-gray, seemed to close in tighter the longer they sat. A narrow bench lined one side of the room, and the smell of bleach mixed with something far older, sweat, rust, and years of stories no one wanted to remember. Ayanna sat with her back straight, her arms still cuffed in front of her, her lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't speak, didn't blink. She was calculating. Across from them, a single security camera blinked red, but both of them noticed that it wasn't moving. It wasn't recording. Not anymore. "This is what they do," she finally said, breaking the silence. "Keep us cold, quiet, isolated. It's not about process. It's about power." Marcus nodded slightly. "They think we're just another pair of complaints no one will follow up on." Footsteps echoed outside. The door opened, and a uniformed officer stepped in. Officer Denning, according to his badge. He looked tired, annoyed to be working past shift change. "Let's go," he said flatly. "Where?" Ayanna asked. "Interview room." They were led through a narrow hallway lined with steel doors and blank bulletin boards. Marcus tried to count how many cameras they passed, but most had little red stickers over their lenses, disabled. Deliberately, in the interview room, 2 chairs sat across from a metal table, scratched and dented. A half-empty water bottle sat next to a tape recorder that wasn't turned on. The officers didn't sit, they hovered. "Names," one barked. "You have our IDs," Ayanna replied coolly. "I said names," he repeated, louder this time. Ayanna leaned forward slightly. "Ayanna Pierce, civil rights attorney, bar number 431792. "Marcus Pierce," her husband said calmly. "Senior investigator, DOJ Civil Rights Division. Badge number 90. For a second, the room stilled. The officers exchanged glances. Then one of them, the taller one, Officer Gleason, snorted. "Yeah, And I'm the president. Marcus didn't flinch. Then you won't mind verifying our identities. But no one moved, no call was made, no computer was used. Instead, Gleason leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. You are causing a disturbance in a private business. The store manager asked for assistance. That's all this is. Really? Ayanna said. Because your partner grabbed my arm before I even said a word. That's your version. It's the version that's going to end up in court, she snapped. The officer's expression hardened. You think you're intimidating us? No, Marcus said. We're documenting you. Again, silence. Gleason walked to the table and grabbed a clipboard. Well, since you two are so important, you won't mind staying overnight while we verify that little story. Holding cell again. Are we being charged? Ayanna asked. You'll know in the morning. The door slammed shut behind them. Back in the cell, Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. They're buying time. They're buying alibis, Ayanna corrected. Scrubbing footage. Getting their story straight. What do we do? She exhaled, then tilted her head toward the tiny air vent above them. Wait. Just a little longer. A few blocks away, in a quiet townhouse in Capitol Hill, a cell phone buzzed to life. The screen lit up with a message. Urgent. Marcus and Ayanna, detained. Precinct. It was sent to only one person, Lydia Carter, Ayanna's law partner, and one of the most feared litigation attorneys in the country. Within 10 minutes, Lydia had called in favors from 3 federal contacts, a sitting district judge, and an old friend at the press. By the time she walked into her office, the DOJ switchboard had received 6 formal complaints demanding information on 2 unlawfully detained officials. And that was just the beginning. Back in the cell, Ayanna's watch beeped softly. It was set to vibrate every hour, a habit she had picked up during marathon court prep sessions. We've been here 5 hours, she said, glancing at the crack in the wall across from them. They're going to try to transfer us. That's when things disappear. Marcus stood up. Then we can't wait anymore. He walked to the door, pressed his palm flat against the cold metal. Then, with every bit of calm professionalism he could muster, he shouted, This is Marcus Pierce with the Department of Justice. You are currently detaining 2 federal employees without cause or charge. As of this moment, your actions are in direct violation of federal law. There was no immediate response, but somewhere down the hallway, a radio crackled. 15 minutes later, the cell door opened, but it wasn't an officer. It was Lydia Carter, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. I suggest you let my clients go, she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through concrete, or I start serving subpoenas like candy on Halloween. Behind her, one of the marshals handed over a sealed folder. Federal warrant for immediate review of internal precinct records, he said, handing it to a red-faced sergeant. Effective now. Ayanna and Marcus stood slowly. The cuffs came off. No one spoke. As they walked out of the station, the hallway was quiet. Officers avoided eye contact. One even stepped aside and muttered an apology under his breath. Outside, the early morning sky had turned gray. Rain was coming. Lydia opened the car door.
You okay?
Ayanna slid in. Better than them. Marcus looked back at the precinct's front entrance. This isn't over. No, Lydia agreed. It's just started. As the car pulled away, Marcus checked his phone. Dozens of messages, missed calls, emails, and a news alert. DOJ attorney and civil rights lawyer detained without cause. DOJ orders full federal probe. Ayanna didn't smile. She didn't need to. Justice was awake. By sunrise, the story had spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with hashtags, Injustice for Pierces, Racist Cop Caught, Unlawful Detention. News anchors on national morning shows were already broadcasting snippets of security footage leaked by an anonymous source, grainy video showing Ayanna's wrist being yanked, Marcus being slammed against a shelf of bottled water, and the officers' cold indifference as they led the couple out of the store. At 8:05 a.m., the U.S. Department of Justice issued a formal statement confirming that a full investigation was underway into the detainment of DOJ investigator Marcus Pierce and civil rights attorney Ayanna Pierce. The investigation would include charges of false arrest, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, potential civil rights violations under Federal Code 1. Back in Precinct 21, the atmosphere had shifted from arrogance to anxiety. Officer Gleason was called into an emergency meeting with the precinct captain, who was pacing the length of his office like a man walking a plank. "You didn't verify their credentials?" the captain demanded. "They said a bunch of crap, sir. We've heard it before. Everyone claims to be somebody." The captain's face went red. "They were somebody. You cuffed a DOJ investigator and a civil rights lawyer. And now Washington is breathing down our necks." Gleason looked at the floor. "We thought, no. You didn't think, and now your badge isn't just on the line. Your freedom is." Meanwhile, Ayanna sat across from a round table of federal investigators in a private suite at DOJ headquarters, her hair pulled back in a low bun. Hands folded neatly in her lap, she spoke with clinical precision, every moment from the arrest, every detail in the precinct, every name mentioned, every redacted document. She recited them like a transcript. "This wasn't just misconduct," she said. "This was a coordinated culture of abuse. And they didn't hesitate because they thought we were nobodies. They hesitated once they realized we weren't." Marcus followed her statement with forensic analysis. "The store's camera feeds were tampered with. We believe officers used body cams that had pre-programmed shutdown protocols. The footage that survived only exists because one camera hadn't synced to the precinct's cloud yet. That's the leak. That's your smoking gun." The lead investigator, a woman with gray hair and piercing blue eyes, nodded slowly. "We'll subpoena all internal communications from the precinct, effective immediately, and we'll need your full testimonies on record." At the same time, a separate operation was underway. Lydia Carter, now spearheading a civil rights class action on behalf of over 20 individuals who had filed past complaints against Precinct 21, convened a press conference on the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed, their mics stretched forward like bayonets. "This is not an isolated incident," Lydia began. "We have evidence of systemic targeting, unlawful detainment, racial profiling, and falsified charges going back over 4 years. Today is not just about the Pierces. It's about every person who walked into that precinct and came out with their dignity torn apart." Back inside the station, Officer Denning quietly packed up his desk. He hadn't said much since the Pierces were released. He knew what he had seen. He knew the difference between enforcing the law and enforcing fear. As he dropped his badge on the captain's desk, he simply said, "I didn't sign up for this." That afternoon, the federal oversight team entered Precinct 21 with a court order. Computers were seized, personnel files boxed up. Officer Gleason was handcuffed by his own colleague and escorted out through the back door to avoid the growing protest crowd at the front. Ayanna watched the live stream from her office. Dozens of people, black, white, Latino, Asian, stood shoulder to shoulder in the street. Some held signs that read "Respect Black Families" and "Power Neo Justice." Others held up blank white boards, symbolizing the silence of all those who had been ignored until now. Marcus walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee. They just arrested Officer Gleason. Ayanna didn't flinch. "Good. Let him feel what it's like." He sat beside her, handing her the mug. "How are you holding up?" She smiled faintly. "Stronger than they ever expected me to be." By evening, the mayor had issued a statement. "We are horrified by the events at Precinct 21. Effective immediately, the entire command structure is suspended pending investigation." The police chief resigned within 24 hours. 3 days later, Ayanna stood before the House Judiciary Committee. She wore a navy blue blazer, no jewelry, no makeup, just her words and her truth. "What happened to us was not rare," she said, looking directly at the row of lawmakers before her. "What made it rare is that we lived to speak about it, and we had the tools to fight back. Most people don't. That's why we're here, because if the law doesn't work for everyone, it works for no one." Applause erupted in the chamber. Marcus followed her testimony with a warning. Our system is only as strong as its weakest precinct, and right now, the cracks aren't just showing, they're gaping. In the following weeks, legislation was proposed for a new federal law, the Equal Detainment Protection Act, aimed at enforcing body cam use, requiring immediate access to legal counsel upon arrest, and federal audits of precincts with over 15% complaint-to-arrest ratios. The Pierces didn't stop there. Fiona launched a nonprofit Justice Link, dedicated to offering legal resources for families wrongly arrested, particularly in underserved communities. Within 2 months, they had already taken on 58 active cases. Marcus led DOJ-sponsored training programs for law enforcement across the country. His focus: implicit bias, lawful detainment, and systemic accountability. But they never went back to being just names on a file. They became symbols, reluctant ones, maybe, but powerful. The image of the Pierces walking out of Precinct 21 hand in hand, bruised but unbroken, graced the front cover of Time, Newsweek, and The Atlantic. They didn't ask to be in the spotlight. But now that they were, they lit the way for others. And while their fight had begun with metal cuffs and cold cement, it ended with something far stronger. A message, etched into the very law they once had to fight to access. Justice isn't given, it's demanded. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and stories like the one you just witnessed remind us how painfully true that still is. The Pierces weren't taped by luck. They were saved by memory, by courage, and by the refusal to stay silent. Their story is a mirror to our own society, how we treat the voiceless, how power can be misused, and how change begins with someone brave enough to say enough. Let this be your reminder that silence isn't neutral. It sides with the oppressor. If this story moved you, taught you, or opened your eyes, don't just scroll past. Hit like, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, or tell us about a time you spoke up when it was hard. Subscribe to our channel, because these aren't just stories. These are lessons, warnings, and sparks for something greater. And maybe, just maybe, the next story we tell could be